So welcome everyone. This is, believe it or not, the 99th day since Premier Ford and MPP Parham Guild made their public commitment to stop the Campbellville quarry, and their comments were one way or another. So what I'd like to do is ask Megan just to kick this off. We could just hear the audio tape. I believe we have.
I'm not in favor of that. I believe in governing for the people, and when the people don't want something, you don't do it. Very, very simple. Parham's been in my office every second day. I've had every minister and Minister of Environment, Minister of Natural Resources, Parham, and we're putting together a good plan moving forward. But I'll tell you, if I'm just not in favor of it, and I'll pass it over to Parham. But again, folks, remember, you're the boss. You say jump, I say how high. That's how it works in my world. Same as the private sector business that we came from. It's always customer service excellence. You aren't going to put something in that the whole community is dead against. It's very simple. I know the mayor, you don't want it. No one wants it. I don't want it. We're going to make sure it doesn't happen one way or another. So we'll pass it over to Parham. Thank you.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you for that question, Chris. As the Premier pointed out, obviously I've been in his office regularly on this issue because I know how important it is to the community, and we have attended regularly the town hall meetings that are held locally, and I understand, and I've been also speaking to the ministers that are responsible, Minister Yakubeski and Minister Urick, and I feel fairly confident. And as the Premier just mentioned, I mean, the Premier and the government is all about serving the people and making sure that the decisions that we're making are in the best interest of people. If the community does not want a project to move forward, bottom line, we're going to make sure the project doesn't move forward. It's that simple. But we will have something to announce, hopefully, in the very near future officially. But for now, I do want to let the community know that we stand with you, we stand by you, and the ministers and my caucus colleagues, my cabinet colleagues, all are fully briefed and are aware of the situation in Campbellville and the Reed Road Quarry, and the Premier is fully briefed, and we're on the right path. So just stay tuned for news in the very near future. Thank you.
I think most of you may remember that audio tape, or at least the conversation that was recorded in newsprint as well. But Action Milton, we understand that the Ontario government has many pressing concerns, the number one issue on the list being ensuring public health and supporting an economic recovery in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. But we also need a timely resolution of the proposed Campbellville quarry to address both these goals, all these goals actually. And residents of Milton prefer to focus their personal energy and financial resources on the health of their families and the work, their work and businesses, public health, and on the economic recovery. Spending a lot of volunteer time and preparing for a possible LPAT hearing and contributing potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars to prepare and appear at an LPAT hearing is frankly a waste of time and money. We've invited Parham Guild, but Parham is not available tonight, so we have Robert Thompson here in his place, and Robert will speak to whatever message Parham had for us. After the presentation, there'll be some time for questions from you, but we will welcome Robert. Next, what I'd like also to do is introduce Mike Balkwell from Wellington Water Watchers, and we'll take over from here.
Hi, everybody. As George said, Mike Balkwell, I work with the Wellington Water Watchers. We're supporting Action Milton's campaign to stop the Campbellville quarry. I'm going to be the facilitator for tonight's conversation. I'm very briefly going to review the agenda. In just a moment, we're going to introduce Robert Thompson, Executive Assistant to MPP Parham Guild, who's going to give us an update. And then there'll be a time for questions, answers, comments on that presentation. And again, I remind you that you can use the chat box or the raise your hand option, and we'll create a speakers list from that. After that, we're going to have an update from the town of Milton. Mayor Krantz, Christina Tesser-Dirksen, and Colin Best will all speak in that order. And again, We'll have time for questions and answers. Then Heather Murch from the board will give an update on the joint agency review team. Then we'll hear from David Donnelly, the Action's lawyer, more questions and answers, and then we'll talk about next steps. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Robert Thompson from Parm Gill's office. Robert, will you join us with your audio and video?
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Thank you, George, and the rest of the board for inviting MPP Gill. As some of you may have known or seen today, there was a budget day today, so thank you for having me in his stead. He does wish that he could join you. We're hopeful that that everyone on this call has contacted our office in opposition of this quarry. If you have and you've provided your mailing address, you would have received either an email or a letter to directly to you after what the board had played there was an awesome statement by the Premier and by MPP Gill, and that commitment has not wavered. I understand that timelines, everyone would always like a quicker timeline and a more expedited process, but unfortunately that's not always in the best interests of taxpayers. So I don't really have an update in terms of a timeline, but what I can recommit is exactly what MPP Gill had said, is that if the community doesn't want this, they will do everything in their power to make this not happen. So I want to thank again the board for all their efforts going forward and for getting the community organized around this issue. Like I said, if you haven't contacted our office, please do. We do send regular updates on this directly to you. So the email is parm.gill@pc.ola.org, and I can share that in the chat there. So I'm happy to take any questions you have at this point.
So Debbie Stokes, could you want to come online and ask your question?
Why could Parm not give us at least 20 minutes to talk to us? Why is he hiding?
I don't accept the premise of your question, Debbie. Quite frankly, Parm is not hiding, and that's where I say, please contact our office. We're happy to have a one-on-one conversation. But unfortunately today, it wasn't possible with the budget being released. He is tied up at Queen's Park. But absolutely, we'd be happy to set something up one-on-one, no question. So contact our office, Debbie, and we can set that up.
It's ridiculous.
Robert, Ann's question is, so we are no further ahead than at the last meeting. Is that true? Would you say that?
So what I would say is that obviously this is a meeting called by Action. We're happy to participate, absolutely, as the provincial office. And what I would also say is, and Mike, I'm sure you could back this up, these applications do typically take a long time to process. So I know we are still early in the process. We're hopeful that we can come to a resolution in the near future, as that statement said. But absolutely not. I would say we're always further ahead every day, because as you heard on that recording, MPP Gill is actually in the Premier's face regularly. So we're definitely further ahead than we were last time. So thank you for that question.
Scott Travers, are you able to turn on your audio and visual part, your video?
Yeah. I actually asked it last time, but I feel the need to ask it again, which is why we can't get the government to issue a ministerial directive. The government has issued many. There was one that came out just recently out in Durham. It's a simple way to fix the process. I understand, there can be ramifications to it, and it's maybe something they don't relish doing politically, but the Premier's made the commitment. The proponent has scoffed at the Premier's comments in the letters that they sent to us. Why not issue a directive?
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Scott. And I can say, quite honestly, I can't speak for the proponent and what they choose to or not choose to communicate. What I can say is that ministerial zoning order that you're referring to was actually at the request of Pickering City Council. and it was to facilitate a building of Durham Live and a number of other facilities there. It'll facilitate 10,000 jobs, and really that's what we're looking to do and to use that tool for. I can't speak for the city council or for the Milton Town Council, but I can say that that is at the request, and no zoning order has been issued without the simple request from Town Council. But at the same time, those zoning orders are usually economic drivers, and that's what they're focused on. All the zoning orders to date are to either build affordable houses in downtown Toronto, facilitate, I believe Durham Live is going to have about 10,000 jobs there. So I can appreciate possibly looking at that as an option from the community's perspective, but from a policy government perspective, that's what those zoning orders are used for.
That's your choice, though. I mean, you could use the zoning order in this
I can't
case.
speak for the minister. I'm not here on behalf of Minister Clark, and that's where I would have to leave that. But I wanted to provide you some context about what the zoning orders to date, the one that you're referring to, has been used for.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, though, Scott.
Robert, at the beginning of your statement, you said that Pickering requested that MZO. Are you suggesting that the Milton Town Council could and should request an MZO?
I'm not suggesting anything, Mike, and I know you're trying to put me on the spot there, and I don't really appreciate that, because I don't want this to turn into that. I'm here to provide an update. I can't also speak for the minister. I don't have any influence on what Minister Clark or the Premier do with ministerial zoning orders. What I can provide you is the context of how the existing zoning order that was referred to in the question was used for. So that would be the answer for that.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Robert. I was just seeking clarity, but what's behind your comment. David Donnelly would like to ask a question.
Hi, Robert. Thanks. I have a quick question sort of about process, which is to say that there's a lot of process that's going on at the moment, all of which is costing taxpayers money, particularly Milton taxpayers. Given the unequivocal statement by the Premier and by MPP Gill, in your opinion, would it be a good time for the process to actually take a breather to allow the Premier to act on his promise? Would that be a good idea?
Well, I think to answer that, David, what I would say is I think that you've seen a pause in the process in terms of an extension for the proponent to reply because of COVID-19, and that really is at the center of that extension. So I'm not quite sure what you're specifically referring to, but I'm happy to take that offline if you'd like, and we can get you a written response if that would work for you.
Well, I guess I'd rather do it tonight, and if you can't answer, that's fine. But one thing that's ongoing is the Joint Agency Review Team that's sponsored by Halton Region, but includes the Town of Milton, the Conservation Authority, the Niagara Escarpment Commission, and the public, and Action Milton. That's why I'm asking the question. So should we be spending a lot of money on that process, or should that be suspended at the same time that the response of JDCL is suspended?
Yeah, and that's a fair, I understand your question. That is a fair question for me. I would hesitate to give the direction to the Action Milton group, quite frankly, to proceed with that or not to proceed with that, as I would the region of Halton and the municipality for that review. That review, I believe, takes place regularly for other issues as well. So I don't know exactly what the mechanism to pause that would be. But if there is a mechanism, I'm sure His Worship or one of the councillors on the call might be able to speak to that in a few minutes. That would probably be a question better answered for them, or better asked to them, David.
Well, it's not so much the mechanism to pause it, so we'll be asking that question a bit later. I guess it's just to the provincial government that the Premier has been so clear in his promise. Should we be spending any taxpayers' money on process at this time, when an announcement is likely fairly soon? So should we be spending a lot of money on this process if the decision's coming so soon?
Are you there, Robert? Have we lost you?
I'm not sure. I just heard David's question a little bit. I think I understand. Can you still hear me, Mike?
Yep.
So I think I understand what you're getting at, David. And that's that is an understandable position and a tough position to be in. I wouldn't advise one way or the other, to be frank. That would be a decision best for the Action Board. They're using donated resources. What I can say in generality is that there's only one taxpayer, and to have taxpayer money go towards any process for me personally as a conservative is tough to watch. But you know just as well that there are some processes that do need to transpire. And that's why I think the town has come on board and looked at this as supporting the opposition for the quarry. The region is facilitating that process, and so I can understand from the Action Board's perspective that they are using donation resources. And from the municipality, I believe those are internal resources. But again, I would defer to His Worship or one of the councillors to answer what the resources are expelled on that.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, David. There's a question from Epley, E-P-L-E-Y, Epley.
Yeah, my name is actually Charles Play. It's Emmeline Play. We're sharing our computer together. So the question is we'd just like to, because we're hearing a commitment, but we don't really understand exactly how this is going to be implemented. So can you speak to what exactly the government's proposal or approach is to meet your commitment?
That's a tough one to answer directly, and I'm not trying to give you a political answer, but there are a number of different methods that are being employed, and I think you saw from the commitment from the Premier, from MPP Gill, and both ministers responsible, Minister Urick and Minister Yakubuski, that they are all around the table looking at options to fulfill that commitment. So absolutely, there is nothing off the table at this point. But in terms of what exactly will transpire, I would not be able to divulge that today. Okay, but what I could say, just to cap that off and provide the confidence for everyone on this call, and I'm really glad that clip was played. That commitment has not wavered whatsoever, and we're happy to send another update through to everyone who wasn't able to join this call to that effect. Absolutely.
Can you say that you have a mechanism that you will be able to utilize to meet your commitment?
I think absolutely the commitment stands, and they as in people higher than my pay grade, they will enact one of the mechanisms, I'm sure, in terms of fulfilling that commitment. But like I said, that commitment has not wavered whatsoever.
Is there any kind of a timeline?
Unfortunately, I wish there was, but as you've seen, even with the response from the proponent, that timeline has been moved. So I would want to not heighten expectations on a timeline that I don't control myself.
Thanks, Charles. Is Katie Hunford? Katie Hunford raised her hand. Is she available to?
Hi. Yeah, I'm here. So I just wanted to address a couple things that were brought up previous, just to clarify for you. One of the things that Scott brought up was the fact of a potential ministerial directive. And I know that your response was that in past they have only ever been economically connected. I just wanted to make sure that it's very clear coming from our community that our belief is that if this quarry goes forward, people who live within a certain distance and radius of this quarry will be economically impacted by the pure loss in property value to our property that we have owned and love and take care of in this property, in this community. So I just want to make sure that that message gets clearly brought to Parm, and I don't know if I agree that those two things can be kept separate, that ministerial directives would only be financially something that would benefit for the economy when you think of only jobs. The economy is much more than that, and for those of us who are property owners, we highly value the fact that our money is tied up in our properties. So the other thing I want to talk to is, as a member who has financially and time supported this quarry fight, is that when the government makes a commitment 100 days ago that there is an imminent decision coming. I would, and I know that you've made a comment as well that this has been, it's a long process and we're just at the beginning. We are well into 2 years now of doing this process. So the fact that 3 months ago, a quarter of a year ago, there was a commitment made publicly that there would be an imminent decision, I would like some more clarity specifically about when someone considers that to be imminent and when that decision will be made, and whether or not we're looking at waiting another 100 days and therefore would be over half a year waiting for a commitment and a resolution to this. The other question I would then have is, in the meantime, as the process continues, what is going to happen to our community who potentially is looking at facing an LPAT in the meantime, and what will happen if that process goes forward prior to PARM and the government making a stop to this?
Yeah, no, thank you, Katie. Thank you for those well thought out questions. The first one on property value, that's well heard. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, putting it in that context, and that is well received. Not only property value, but I know that the Action Committee has done a lot of work to submit some reports that actually show some impact to water as well. So that's really where I say all of the ministers that are relevant to this file are around the table for those discussions, including the Premier. On the timeline for the commitment, I wish I had a magic wand to tell you it would be 100 days from now, 50 days from now. I simply don't, and I don't want to. I don't want to set up false expectations for a specific timeline. I know the community wants a resolution to this. We want a resolution to this. Parm lives not far from the proposed site, so he absolutely same as everyone there. But what I can say is that commitment has not changed. It's not wavering, and it will not change. And so I hope you can take confidence in that. I understand the community, including the Action Board, wants a hard timeline. I just unfortunately can't provide that for you. And I would hate to provide something that then would be a false commitment. So that would be honestly something that I wouldn't be able to speak further to.
So to give you some background, I'm an educator, and I would never use the word imminent to describe waiting 100 days. And I would never use the word imminent to describe waiting 6 months for a decision. So
yeah,
maybe
Katie, if I could,
politicians need to choose their words wisely.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. And so as a staffer of a politician, if that was a written statement, absolutely. But it was a press conference where MPP Gill announced 5 new schools, and the Premier was in town to help. As an educator, I'm sure you saw the announcement. Which was a great announcement, but one of the reporters had asked about this because obviously it's a large issue in the community, and so those words were off the cuff. If they were written, I agree with you. We would have scripted that a little tighter to measure expectations, and that's what I'm trying to do tonight. I don't want to give you the imminent word or the near future word and set up that false expectation. But I do appreciate the angst in the community for a want for a timeline. I just unfortunately don't have a specific drop dead date that we're able to provide tonight.
And I think that too, hopefully the message can be understood that those of us who have financially supported this fight and continue to financially support this fight, what it means to us by not having a decision is to continue to stretch our own financial ability to make sure that this does not go forward at a time when people in our community are not working. People in our community have people who are at home who have no idea what the next day will bring due to the pandemic. And the fact is that a decision that is imminent and coming soon would really help to ease the tension and stress of the members of the community. So, and I understand an off the cuff comment, but words matter. And, I think that had he said, well, a decision is coming is definitely different than imminent. So, and I guess my follow-up would be that about the LPAT. So what does happen from our perspective now if an LPAT does get called? Will that be something that can be halted? Is that something where the minister would step in? Where's the direction on that?
Yeah, so the proponent has until I believe January to reply and try and suffice the objections that have been raised. Until that point, I wouldn't be able to speak whether an LPAT would be feasible or not. That would be at a point where the ministry officials would look at whether those objections were sufficiently quelled or not. But like I said, I would go back to the commitment that you're referring to, although an off-the-cuff comment, the meaning of that, and I hope you can see, even a school announcement that I'm sure the premier wasn't expecting a question about the quarry. He was fully briefed. He was fully aware of it, and they are working, tirelessly on this. So I wish I had some direction to give the action board, but unfortunately, I wouldn't be able in a position to direct the board to do what to do with their financial resources. So. But I want to reiterate again that commitment has not changed from MPP Gill, the Premier, or the ministers relevant.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Katie. Honestly, thank you.
George, you're next. Then I have two more after that on the list.
Hey, Robert, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I don't have too much heat on you today. Hey, Katie stole my question, but that's okay on the LPAT, because as you know, it's definitely on everybody's mind, to march, the proponent is marching towards that path. And it's certainly, it's certainly a major concern, because, what the community heard from the Premier and our MPP is that they're going to stop this. So in the minds, at least in many people, is okay, when, right? Let's see it. And that's problematic now, because I'm sure the proponent knows that too. And I'm sure some people are probably saying, okay, well, if the government's going to stop this, why should we continue to support, put our money out? I want to make sure that, as a community, this is not going to fall away. And what you're telling us that it's not. So I have a request. Can MPP Parham Gill host a community meeting to address a lot of these questions that are coming your way today? Can he call a meeting with the community himself and address these questions?
George, I think at any point, I mean, we've been transparent in communicating with the community. There's no question. But I to have a meeting just to have a meeting, I find is not an effective use of time. I'm happy to set something up if that's the request of the community, absolutely. But what I want to say is that this is, like I said at the beginning, this is a process. I understand the community heard that, and now the next question, exactly to your point, George, is when. And the same answer would be what MPP Gill would say at that meeting. So again, just measuring expectations. I wouldn't want to call a community meeting and then have all this hype around the community meeting and then have the same answers delivered today, delivered at that meeting as the members of the community are hearing today. I know that time is valuable for everyone on this call, and I do value that. So that's where I would leave that answer. Absolutely, if that's something that the community would find value in, I'm happy to absolutely facilitate that. But again, I wouldn't want to call a meeting and have expectations risen about what the answers could be at that point, because I can guarantee you, if there is an update, I think as we've demonstrated, we're the first ones to communicate directly with the community, directly with the action board. We've sent out letters, we've sent out emails. So by no means are we hiding any updates that we can share. We would be happy to share updates as they come in.
Yeah, no one's suggesting you're hiding anything. I think what I'm proposing is that if you go back with a lot of these questions, that and we can collect them for you and send them to you, and at an appropriate time, not soon, hopefully, is that you can our MPP can actually give us some perspective on, look, don't worry about the LPAT, for example. We're going to stop this, and if you get to an LPAT, it'll stop before you get there, because God only knows if we have to raise another $400,000 or $500,000 to compete in an LPAT where many don't win, and that would be a shame, particularly when we have a proposal from the Premier and the MPP that says, we're going to stop this because you folks don't want it. So I'm just proposing, take these questions back, and maybe there are people in government who can give some perspective to our MPP and bring it back to us.
Absolutely, and that's where I really do, especially to respect expectations. I think Katie brought it up well. In a community meeting, things can be said that if one word is different, that can set expectations to a timeline or to a certain announcement or to a certain direction. And that's where in writing we are always careful with making sure that the information coming out of the office is exactly correct, is accurate. And I hope we've demonstrated that. So if there's anything in it absolutely send the questions in, and we are happy to get an answer back. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Oh, okay. I've got 4 more people on the speaking list, and then I'm going to suggest that we close this part of the meeting at that point.
I know I'm a popular guy, Mike, but
I know you're popular, and I don't want to take your screen time away from you, Robert. And if the audience says no, we're not done, we have to ask more questions, we will. But I'm kind of sending a signal that in 4 more questions we may turn to other speakers.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask Keith Rasmussen.
I had a question, but Katie has sort of asked a similar question. What's happening here, Robert, is you're making me very nervous, because the words that Rob Ford originally used, I've got to paraphrase somewhere, something like, it's not going to happen. We're going to make sure it doesn't happen, or something like that. Now you're using these famous everything in our power words. There's a little difference there. And it's sort of similar to, I think it's a bit, you're walking back a bit from the earlier comments, just the same way as you said to Katie that you're working back from the commitment on time. So can you reassure me that there is a mechanism whereby this will not happen?
Keith, I can reassure you that commitment has not changed. Absolutely, I can reassure you. And I apologize if my answers came across any different way, but the assurance from the Premier and from MPP Gill, who have asked me to join tonight, that commitment has not changed, will not change. And I'm happy to clarify that in writing to you if that would be so inclined, but absolutely that commitment has not changed. I hope that provides you some confidence.
Thank you.
Whoops, I'm just going to ask, though, the way that you typed the question, Richard, and forgive me, Robert, just to be sure we cover this off. Richard said in his chat box, bottom line, do we have to prepare and fund an LPAT defense, or can we rely on the Premier's terminating the application before a decision is made in JTCL's favor?
Again, I don't control the timeline, Mike. I wish I did. I wouldn't want to advise one way or the other on that, quite honestly. What I refer back to, again, is the commitment that they have made. Absolutely.
Okay, Anne Gabriel.
So I asked the question about whether we are any farther ahead now than we were 99 days ago. And I actually didn't hear an answer to that question. So I would ask that question again, looking for specifics around what has moved forward since 99 days ago. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. So in the process, the proponent does have until the beginning of January to reply to objections. What I can say is that we are further ahead in the sense that there's been a lot of discussion between MPP Gill, the Premier, both Ministers Yakubuski and Urick, in deciding how to approach this and how to fulfill the commitment. I know that the community wants the specifics about all the behind the scenes details. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position tonight to give exactly those details. But the commitment has not changed. And what also is no further ahead are shovels in the ground at the Reed Road Quarry. So those things are absolutely on track. I know everyone wants a specific answer out of me, but unfortunately, that's the answer for where we are currently. And as soon as there's an update, absolutely, like I said to George, we are the first ones to communicate directly to the community, and we will continue to do that. So thank you.
The last comment in this section, David Donnelly. Last question, pardon me.
Hi, Robert. I'm just have a quick comment on something you said, which is that MZOs are used as economic drivers, as job creators, and that may very well be the position of this government. I can tell you I've had personal involvement in 2 MZOs that were issued under a previous government. The first is probably very familiar to the people on the phone, and that was the April 2010 MZO issued regarding the St. Mary's Cement Flamborough quarry. That was an MZO that was issued to stop a quarry, and that was the Campbellville quarry. So most people are quite familiar with that example.
One thing on that, David, I want to just provide some context to your comment. That MZO ended up in a NAFTA court, and I believe the government settled for $10 or $11 million because that MZO was actually incorrectly applied, from my understanding. You're a lawyer. If you have involvement in that, you can clarify those. But that, from my understanding, that is what happened there, I think.
And that was partly as a result of St. Mary's constitution as an international company, and they felt that they were being targeted and used to trade. That is not an option for JDCL, just so that we're clear. Yep. And the second one that I'll reference that I had personal involvement in is OREG 6105, which was issued on what's called the North Leslie lands in Richmond Hill. And that was to preserve 375 acres in the Rouge River headwaters complex. So really, for most of us who go back in environmental law and are familiar with the Planning Act in Ontario, MZOs were originally conceived not as an economic driver. That's supposed to be a competition between equal businesses. They were really put in place to stop foolish decisions on the part of municipalities with respect to zoning and official plan amendments that would contravene the provincial interest. It gave the minister a way to really correct municipalities who had made mistakes with their zonings. That's why the power was first produced. Your government's using it the way it chooses. That's up to you. But
yeah,
I just want to say that those are.
Yeah, I appreciate that, David. And I'm not a lawyer, so I do appreciate the historical context. I can say, in the recent government as well, those MZOs that they had used most recently were specifically around the Pan Am Games and expediting development on that. So I think I'm sure you're accurate in what MZOs were conceived with, but in the recent future, those MZOs have been used for those purposes. And like I said, in our government, I know that there is a commitment to make sure we're in line with the requests of town councils in order to facilitate economic activity. So that's how I would say to speak to that.
Okay, thank you.
Robert, thank you for joining us tonight and for providing your time generously to all of this.
Time.
No, it's important we spend this time, and you're welcome to stay with us for the rest of the meeting.
Absolutely.
We're going to switch now, and I'm giving Mayor Krantz a 10-second warning to turn on his microphone and his video. We're going to get an update from Mayor Krantz. Then we're going to hear from Christina Tesser-Dirksen. Then we're going to hear from Colin Best. And then again, we're going to open it up for questions and comments to the audience. So Mayor Krantz, have we made?
Yeah, can you hear me there, Mike?
We can hear you now.
Good show. Well, thank you very much. I'm not so sure if you'd refer to it as an update there, but first of all, thanks very much for having me and 2 of my colleagues join you here this evening. Of course, I've been listening quite intently there and have made a few notes, and I know the question has come up about MZOs, the zoning orders. And also I heard about the JART and should it be suspended. And I guess, Mike, I have a question as well. What is the request of both the provincial government and Parliament in this instance, the town of Milton, is what I would like to know. And again, as I would emphasize that I'm here to do a lot more listening than talking as well. And I don't speak for council, I speak just for myself on this, and as you mentioned, two of my colleagues are here. So and one of the things that I'm also aware of, I rarely ever point a finger at anybody or anything, because I'm also well aware that when I point a finger, there's three of them coming back at me. A little bit of the philosophy that I'm always aware of. So I just wonder, whose court is the ball in now? And I'm well aware that timing is very critical. And there was a lot of questions of Robert, and Robert handled himself very, very well as far as I'm concerned. He's in a very awkward position on, speaking for a politician. And again, I understand that Parm is tied up in Queen's Park there as well. So, and I understand very clearly, and it's a dilemma that Action finds themselves in, on having to seriously think about raising significant dollars for that fight that was alluded to with LPAT and the whole process there. So those are just some of my comments, and probably there's more questions than answers on my part there, but it's something for you, Mike, and the Action Group, and anybody else that wants to ask me any questions. And again, if they sound guarded, they probably are, because I know that there's always that definite risk of that liability. And I know Robert mentioned about a $10 million settlement, and I certainly don't want the town to be in any position for that, for sure. So with that, Mike, back over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Christina?
Hi, thanks, Mike, and hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here with you again. I fully understand the frustration with the timeliness, George, that you talked about in your opening remarks. I will mention that since I've become an elected person, I've realized that timeliness to a normal person and timeliness to a bureaucracy are two different things. And this is one of those processes that just takes a lot of time. To that end, I said at the last meeting I was really relieved to hear the Premier's comments. And I'm fairly confident that the Premier and MPP Gill are smart enough men to know that making unequivocal comments like that are not going to be forgotten easily by the community, by us. And I know the question's probably going to come up about the JART. That's still ongoing, and I believe we can expect a report at some point in the new year. But Mr. Donnelly, you kind of alluded to the in the question to Robert, and why are we continuing with the JART? Maybe why are we putting this money and effort into it? Well, as confident as I am that the Premier was speaking truthfully about his commitment to stop this quarry, I think it would be irresponsible for the town to simply throw up its hat to fate, so to speak. We have to be responsible in using the tools we have available to us, in the odd chance that maybe that doesn't pan out. The JART is the tool we have to use, and I think we should use it. If there does come an LPAT, and I could be wrong, I'm sure Councillor Best can correct me because he's been through a few of them, but the JART report would be something that would be really valuable in an LPAT in proposing our case. And also, the town of Milton has stated very, very clearly over and over again that we are against this application. They, I would presume, will also be bringing a team to an LPAT to defend that position and putting our own experts to speaking to that as well. So those are my comments for now. Again, it's not much of an update like the mayor said, because we're kind of in a holding pattern that we're finding frustrating as well. It'd be much easier for us if we could come here and tell you that we have these answers, but hopefully the next meeting we'll have something more substantial to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Colin.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you everybody for participating. I'm disappointed that MPP Gill couldn't make it tonight, but thank Robert for doing an excellent job trying to answer the questions. But similar to Mayor and Councillor Tusser-Dirksen, we received an update yesterday from staff just basically saying that continue the process, both the region of the town, NEC and conservation authorities, because this is something that we have to keep doing, because until we get told otherwise by the province, we have to make sure all our options are covered. The region's also participating with the Nelson Quarry expansion application. And as we mentioned earlier, both the town and regional council are unanimous in opposing both applications because of the same reasons. It's one, damaging the headwaters, it's affecting existing communities, and three, we don't even know what the after use is. And that's what really concerns me, is the application is not just for extraction, it's for industrial use afterwards. And we don't know the extent of it. A lot of it is opposed to by the region. So I look forward to your questions, but it's basically stay tuned. And I have the same frustration. We've been going through the same thing with the CN Rails application for 6 years now, and we're still waiting for a decision from the federal government. So, and that was over 6 months ago. So I understand everybody's frustration, but we're still working towards it, and just keep at it. And I really appreciate everybody's concern.
Thank you, Colin. This is a moment for those of you who are listening in. Do you have a question? Do you have a comment for the mayor, for the councillor, Christina or Colin? I see your hand, David, but I'm just going to hold on a second. George has got his hand up, so we'll go to George first.
Well, it's thanks, Mike. So, Christina, I just heard you say, and if I misheard you, please correct me, that the JART is continuing, which is, I understand, and that the town may have a place at the table, or the town and region may have a place at the table. In this situation where we're being told it's a stop by the Premier and MPP Parm Gill, should a JART or should an LPAT happen now that a commitment's been made to stop it? Does this mean that the region and the town would intervene on behalf of the community, full hog, just put everything on the table and try to make this go away on our behalf, as opposed to us having to raise all that money?
Who are you pointing a question at, George? Pick one of the three to answer.
It was me.
Could be any one of them, Christina or the mayor, or it's just Christina.
Go ahead, Christina.
Yeah, and again, I'm out of Councillor Best and the mayor, I'm the, the one with the least experience with LPATs. But that being said, it's kind of what we were doing with CN, the same idea. I mean, we had a team assembled to speak to that. I would presume, and I can't speak obviously on one person on council, but I would presume that we would continue along with our commitment that we've made to object to the project. Councillor Best, I saw you raising your hand. Do you want to add something?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Colin.
Similar comments. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Basically, I was involved with the St. Mary's cement application, as well as the region and other councillors in the area, and we did the same thing. We just kept continuing until the province, came down with a decision, and it wasn't a very expensive decision. So I can understand Rob's and the province's reluctance to make an answer there, because it is a complicated situation. They have to make sure everything's done right, and hopefully get it all settled to everybody's satisfaction.
I know David Donnelly put his hand up, but I just want to check if there's anybody else in the audience with a question or a comment. Going once, going twice. All right, David.
Thank you. This question is for both councillors. And I took a note that Councillor Tesser-Dirksen said that we've got to keep going with JART. It would be irresponsible not to, and that the JART report will be really valuable. And I wrote that down. And then Councillor Best said that we have to keep going with JART. And I wrote that down too. And I guess my question is, now that the Premier has said unequivocally that the quarry is not going to happen, and we had that commitment confirmed tonight by Robert, and he said unequivocally the commitment hasn't changed, and he said he would commit it to writing, and I would take that in writing. This was an important milestone tonight, because if you were going to change your mind, you'd probably change your mind 100 days out from making the decision, and they haven't. To their very great credit, they haven't changed their mind. In other words, according to the Premier of Ontario, there isn't going to be an LPAT hearing. There isn't going to be an ARA license. This isn't happening. At the same time, residents are spending money, and it's big money, for 100 days, they've been spending big money on consultants preparing for a hearing that isn't going to happen. If it does happen, then something very terrible has gone on. There's been a betrayal of residents, and then the lawsuits will be flying all over the place, and LPAT will be the least of everyone's worries. So my question is this, because I think we got to stop beating around the bush with really what is going on with JART. I would like you to tell residents why a JART report at this point would be really valuable. And I want to know why we have to keep going with JART at this point. Those are my two questions.
I don't mind addressing that. I mean, again, I said I'm very confident that the Premier was heartfelt in his comments. And Robert, do you want to jump in first, Robert? I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, if I could, I don't, and I apologize. Maybe I'm tired from a long budget day. But I want everyone on the call to understand that councillors, the MPP, and the Premier are on your side. Don't think that they're not trying to make the best decisions for the community. I know it's not the decisions that you want and the timeline you want. Commitment on all of these politicians, and maybe I can speak freely because I'm a staffer, but the politicians have really stuck their neck out and committed to supporting the community. And so I'd rather take that tone than I thought where this was going. So I'm sorry, Councillor. I just wanted to make sure that was clear again, if that wasn't clear in my comments.
Well, no, of course I appreciate that, and you're very right. I mean, this would be in our backyards too, and we're taxpayers also. I mean, we don't want our taxpayer money spent irresponsibly. But when we have a tool available to us, we want to use it. And I don't want to rely on the province necessarily. I mean, I hope, and believe me, it's removed a lot of pressure to have the Premier step up and make this commitment. Mr. Donnelly, you're a lawyer. You know, things can change, things can pivot. I don't know. I don't have any, I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm sure the province will see its commitment through. But at the same time, I'm not in a position where I'm just going to sit here and twiddle my thumbs and hope for the best. I mean, I want to use the tools we have available. We have talented staff. We have people with skills who've done this before, and we're going to continue on that trajectory for the residents.
If I may, and this will be in my presentation later, but I think it's appropriate to raise it now. What you are doing is creating a detrimental reliance for JDCL. In other words, the Premier has said that the process is stopped. The MPP, that is the position of both the region and the town. And yet you, for some unknown reason, are continuing with an evaluation of an ARA application, which for all intents and purposes doesn't exist anymore. We're very well aware of the fact that part of JART's mandate is to try and reach resolution with JDCL on technical issues. In other words, you're helping JDCL get closer to an approval through the JART process. You're creating a legal record of working with JDCL to get closer to a resolution, and they're going to rely on that. And so when you talk about damages, this is creating a liability or an exposure for the town. Now, if you've got a good reason why you should be proceeding with JART at this point, then we should hear it. You keep saying it's valuable, it's a useful tool. Well, I have to be quite respectful and say, no, it's not. You're helping reduce issues. That's what they're doing. They're resolving technical issues. So I have to go over to Councillor's Best comment, which is we have to keep going. That is category, with all due respect, I like Councillor Best. I think he's an excellent councillor. If I lived in his ward, I'd vote for him. But that's wrong. That's flat out categorically wrong. You do not have to continue with JART. JART is an operation created solely at the whim of the region. All it is an email chain of consultants with a terms of reference that the region can revoke at any second. Now, if JART was taking a really tough line with JDCL, they would have resolved their issues by now, and they would have said, we're too far apart, we're going to make our report, and we're going to recommend against the quarry. That's not what they're doing. They are continuing to resolve issues with JDCL. They're enabling JDCL. They're helping JDCL, and taxpayers are paying for it. So the question that I have for you is, believe me, I know where my client's at on this. They don't want to pay for JART anymore, okay? That's the message you're getting from ratepayers. So we need to hear back from the elected officials who are, you know, put in place to represent the public interest. There's nobody other than JDCL that's saying, please continue on with JART. There's nobody. There's not one resident. I've talked to dozens and dozens of residents down there. There's not one that's saying keep going with JART. There are hundreds and hundreds. You're going to find out lots and lots of people who want it to stop. So my question is, if the people are saying stop JART, and you have the absolute perfect legal authority, you have the right, you have the responsibility to stop it, why aren't you stopping it?
Well, thanks for the question, David. And similar to what Christina stated, the JART is a process no different than any other planning application. The town's dealing with almost over 20 applications right now. And sometimes issues can't be resolved. We have to make sure that we're doing the best planning possible for our communities. And until we get told by the province that the process is over, we continue, because we want to make sure that we have all the evidence there, and just in case. Because I don't know what's going to happen politically next week, let alone 100 days from now at the province, because we've seen changes there previously. I understand everyone's frustration. I'm frustrated as well. But I've been through these before with 3 other quarry applications, and there's a lot of twists and turns there. And we've seen applications approved, such as Dufferin, and we've also seen them disproved, such as the Nelson Quarry application, which was due to the JART process, highlighting that you couldn't resolve these issues. We have to have that proof. If we don't have the proof, JDCL can use other legal means, which you're quite familiar with, to basically get approval. And what concerns me is the Minister of Natural Resources has been approving other applications by this company and others.
If I may, this will be my last comment, if I may. JART is somewhat unique to a very small number of regions in Ontario. Most other municipalities do not use JART for this reason. The citizens don't like it. You say that we're preparing for an LPAT process. It's not a Planning Act application. It's an ARA Act application. The fact of the matter is, if you suspended JART, waiting for the Premier's answer, and then the Premier said, no, we're actually going to proceed with the hearing, then you would simply resume JART. That's the simple solution to this. But I have to be unequivocal, and I thank you for your answer. But really, you haven't given people an answer tonight. I'm going to say it one more time. JART is enabling JDCL in the context of the Premier giving an unequivocal statement, which is confirmed tonight, that it's not going to happen. And you are wasting a lot of time, and you're wasting a lot of money on a process that should stop. The way LPAT hearings work is this. When it's time to construct an issues list, you construct an issues list. JDCL submits their witness statements. The experts for the public agencies submit their witness statements. Sometimes the witness statements are close together, and sometimes the witness statements are far apart. When the two sides are very far apart, you have a very distinct set of issues in the hearing, and that's what you fight it over. What JART is doing, JART is narrowing the two sides together. And the closer together they get, the less chance the public has of beating JDCL. So while JART's working, this is what's happening to the issues. This is what's happening to everyone's chances of defeating JDCL at LPAT. And that's what these residents are paying for. And it's my respectful submission. It should stop.
Thank you, David.
Thanks for your, just Michael, if I could answer that.
Sure.
Yeah, just respect David's position, but as that's not the advice that we're getting both at the municipal and the regional level from our lawyers and planners, and they are recommending to continue on for the reasons that we both stated.
Now, I think David, of course, it was suggested you might want to hear from the 3 elected local officials. And of course, you heard me mention earlier on there that I was going to be doing a lot more listening than talking. One of the things that Mr. Donnelly had mentioned there, that if he was able to vote for Councillor Best, he would. And if I had to hire a lawyer, I'd have to hire Mr. Donnelly too. So he's excellent in what he does. But we've also been guided by legal advice as well. So we adhere to that. For the most part, us elected people don't always take the advice from the professional people. But I get a little concerned, and I'm really glad that this is being recorded, when I hear that we may be assisting, the DIC application. I want to go on record that that is not the case. And again, Mr. Donnelly, with the greatest respect, that's not the case, and I can assure you of that for sure. And I only speak for myself, and Councillor Best and Councillor Tetzer-Durchin speak for themselves. I think I can speak for the majority of council. It's unanimous that we're in opposition to this, whether the JART goes ahead or whether it doesn't. So with that, Mike, hope you had a little bit more frustration, a little bit more clarity to it. So we have to be somewhat careful of what we say, and I'm talking about the 3 elected people from the town of Milton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a couple of people who've raised their hand. The first one is Anne Gabriel and then Paul Gilmore. Can Anne be a co-host again, and can she speak? Will you? There you go, Anne, please.
Okay, thanks, Mike. It seems to me from what I'm hearing here that we're proceeding with a process that the parties are not acting in good faith in regard to. And to me, that seems to set up, not us. We've been pretty clear what our position is all along, but it sets up the municipality and the region and the province and anybody else who has said they're opposed to this process to be charged with acting in bad faith. And is that not putting ourselves behind the 8 ball? I mean, what is the point of doing that? I understand that you're saying you have legal advice and planning advice to proceed with this. And in a normal situation, that would make perfect sense. But when there's a commitment from the Premier that this isn't going to happen, that kind of seems a little contradictory to proceed with a process where you clearly cannot be acting in good faith. Just a comment more than a question.
Thank you, Anne. Paul, you may also have a comment or a question, I'm not sure, but you're a co-host, Paul. Please turn on your microphone and your video if you wish.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, sorry, I don't have a visual, but Colin, you mentioned that there was 3 other applications that you were involved with, and things were had to go through the process. In all those other 3, did the Premier of Ontario at that time say, no, it's not going to happen?
No, none of them.
Right. So why are we going through? Same real question or comment, I guess, more than a question.
Yeah, just on this, to have the Premier, and I was there when he made that statement in the middle of a process, is highly unusual. The only time I can remember the Premier doing something like this was Bill Davis canceling the Spadina Expressway when it was already under construction. This is highly unusual. Most of the other areas or applications got resolved one way or the other through the legal process, and that's what we're following.
But a legal process that is supposed to have been stopped, as our representative has indicated.
Well, until we get the information to the contrary from the Minister of Natural Resources that the process is stopped, we are continuing. That's the advice we received from our lawyers and planners.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Charles, I think, do you have another comment or question? Charles Play? It's E-Plea, E-P-L-E-Y in the... Right,
Yeah.
perfect, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, actually, that was my wife who put that one in. That was the E-Plea, that's Emmeline. Yeah, so to the councillors, just reiterating the other comments is, what is preventing you, and please take this back to council, from just putting a pause on the process? Is there some reason why that's not possible? Because as David said, it's, if for some reason the province doesn't live up to its promise here, the process could be restarted. So it seems to me that we could save a lot of money and angst and trouble by just putting a pause on that, on the JART process. Could you comment on that?
Colin, Christina, Mayor?
Mike, let me jump in on that. You hear me there okay? And I think it's a fair request. If I could suggest, Mike, I don't care whether it's electronically or pen to paper, put that request into the mayor and members of Milton Council. And you might want to CC the region of Halton on this because they're a major player in this. So you might want to think about doing that.
Thank you, Mayor. Colin or Christina, would you like to comment on Charles' suggestion for a pause on the JART?
Mayor highlighted that question quite well. It's best to have a unified response to that, both our staff and the regional staff that are working on it together with the NEC and the Conservation Authority, because this is a joint project. It's not just, we're just one party of four. So the region's taking the lead, and I'll certainly, if you could copy myself and Chair Carr, we can take it back and we'd have a response to you.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Mayor Krantz and Councillor Tester-Dirksen and Best for both your presentations and your engagement with the audience. Heather Murch, who's a member of the Board of Directors, is going to give an update on the JART situation from the actions perspective. Excuse me, she's going to share some information, and then we're going to have David Donnelly expand on his earlier remarks. So Heather, are you queued up as a co-host?
I am.
Okay, you're on.
I hope I am on. Okay, perfect. So I think we've covered off a lot of these points already, but I'll just quickly run through a couple of comments for people who don't necessarily understand what the JART is all about. So we'll talk about the process again that's used to gain approval for the quarry. So 2 years ago, the licensed proponent, James Dick Construction, applied to operate the Reed Road Quarry. Hundreds of people, as we've talked about, including multiple levels of government, opposed the application. So a year later, in July 2019, the JART, comprised of the Halton region, town of Milton, and Conservation Halton, as we just heard, with help from their consultants, issued detailed analyses of the submission. So they reported over 200 problems, errors, and omissions that they found in the reports that came from JDCL's consultants. So doesn't it make you curious to wonder how many hours and dollars went into identifying these problems with the proponent submission? I don't think we actually have a handle on that, but I'm curious about that. And think about it this way, and you know, context is a little different after this conversation we've just had for the last hour and a bit. But when you submit your taxes, if you make mistakes, you wouldn't expect the CRA to give you access to their accountant free of charge to coach you on how to comply with their requirements, right? I mean, CRA would expect you to get it right on your own, using your own accountant. And to me, that's how this process should be regulated too. And I understand why JART is doing what they're doing. You know, it's not a regulated process, but it should be regulated that the proponent has to pay for it. So the proponent takes all of the input and resubmits their revised reports. And so again, JART begins the owner's task of reviewing all the updated information. In December 2019, JART reported that 71%, by my math, of the problems found in July remained open. So to me, that's strike two. So instead of getting a failing grade, the proponent once again submits its revised reports. So JDCL claimed in a letter to one of our community members that 2/3 of the issues had been resolved. So by my count, that leaves 80 still unresolved. And I do hear David's comment about, you know, it's getting narrower and narrower. We're almost, you know, kind of trying to come to an agreement. But after all this time, there are still 80 issues that are unresolved. To me, that's strike three. But guess what? So as we've heard, as of July 24th of this year, the updated reports are again being reviewed by JART. So despite objections from all levels of government, including the Premier's assertion, we've all heard this 99 days ago, that the quarry will not happen, our public funding continues to be spent. So I'm kind of flogging a dead horse a little bit here at this point. But it does seem that in going through with JART continuing on, we're spending a lot of money where maybe it's not necessary. But again, we've heard that point already reiterated a few times. So that's all I'm going to say on that for now. And so we'll just go back to David Donnelly again, who'll tell us more about the JART process. David?
Thank you, Heather. I'm just going to stick my voice in here for a second because I really liked your umpire analogy. 3 strikes, and here's my understanding of how it is for aggregate companies, whether it's at the JART or at the LPAT, is that after the 3rd strike, they can just keep swinging. The problem is there is no umpire. They get as many strikes as they need until they hit a home run. Now, that's just my short editorial comment, and I don't know, David, if you want to expand on that. And sports metaphors don't always work for everybody, but Heather, your 3 strikes led me to that thought. David, you've said a lot tonight, and maybe you've said some of the things you planned on saying in your presentation, but this is an opportunity for you to summarize some of what you said and perhaps make some additional comments you haven't had a chance to make yet. And again, we'll have an opportunity for the people who are listening in to ask questions or make comments after your presentation. David.
Thank you, Mike. And you're quite right that I have said a lot of what I had prepared in my presentation. So I will try and be brief, and maybe there'll be questions and I can expand on what I've said. It is critically important that people understand that the JART process, as it is operating now, is operating to the benefit of JDCL, and that anything that can be accomplished through the JART process at this stage can easily be accomplished should the process start up again, or if this goes to an LPAT proceeding, then the experts that are reviewing JDCL's reports, they can pick that work up if, and it's a big if there's an application that's going to LPAT for adjudication. So it's my primary conclusion tonight that the money that is being spent now, and it's a lot of money, that money is frankly being wasted. Now, we have written the town and asked for an accounting of how much money has been spent on JART consultants to date, and we haven't got an answer. And so I think one of the things that behooves me tonight is to ask the mayor for a commitment to retrieve from Halton Region the cost of JART to date. And then I think there should be a further commitment undertaking from the mayor, not to put the mayor on the spot, but you're paying for this. What is the cost per month of proceeding with JART? You can average it out. Some months are slow, some months are fast. But we should know what's this is costing each month. There's that we're spending tens of dollars that we are per month on these consultants. They are doing that with the list that was 239, now it's about 80. Every day that this goes on, you're getting closer and closer to an agreement between the experts of the public agencies and JDCL's experts. And that agreement or those resolutions can and should be avoided. Now, here's the most alarming part to all of this for me, and that is that JART is supposed to be an open process, and that Action Milton is supposed to be a stakeholder at the table with JDCL. Now, I pulled off the website of the mayor of Burlington, Marianne Mead Ward, who is now part of a preliminary JART process to review the Nelson Aggregate file. Our firm represents Core and Pearl of Burlington, so we are part of the process now. On the mayor's website, it says 2 things. The purpose of the JART protocol, it says 4 things, 2 are irrelevant. First, engage and inform the public more effectively. That's the role of JART. That's according to the mayor of Burlington. 2, improve decision-making and efficiency associated with the process of aggregate applications. There is nothing in here, and there is nothing that you can find that states the necessary ingredient to have JART continue at this time. The only way someone can tell you that JART must continue this time is to find an authority for that proposition. Let me just go through the laundry list of authorities. First, there is no statutory authority for JART. It's not in the Planning Act. It's not in the Agri Resources Act. It's not in the LPAT Act. It doesn't exist. Second, there could be regulatory authority for JART, that it's part of a regulation for preparing for a hearing or to allow for a municipality to be a party that must participate in JART. That regulatory authority does not exist. Third, the authority could be granted through an official plan, policy, that requires for the processing of aggregate applications that a municipality like a region or a town would coordinate its review with other agencies through a JART. That doesn't exist in either the Halton official plan or the Town of Milton official plan. And finally, there could be a bylaw that requires for the processing of aggregate applications and or Planning Act applications that JART be an instrument in the process. That authority does not exist. In other words, JART is a process that is created and managed by council. Council turns on the tap of money and council turns off the tap. And what should be happening in this case is that council should be revisiting the mandate and the purpose of JART. My primary submission tonight is that at the present moment, JART is doing two things that need to be stopped. One, it's assisting JDCL in the resolution of its application. And two, it's spending a lot of money that is a complete waste. Now, I have the benefit of being someone who's been around the environmental movement for over 30 years. And it is true that if an MZO or some instrument was issued with respect to the James Dick application, it would be a rare government intervention, but it is not extraordinary. For example, on November the 17th, we will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Nelson Aggregate License Quarry application hearing commencing. And for those of us who went through that process, you know that even though we were successful at the joint board, we're now dealing with a second application. In other words, the LPAT process can be a very inefficient process for permanently preserving lands. A better anniversary is November of 2000, when the then Ontario Municipal Board process on the Oak Ridges Moraine was suspended by then Premier Mike Harris, and he introduced several months later the Oak Ridges Moraine Protection Act. That was 20 years ago. On June 12th, 1985, we celebrated the 35th anniversary of the introduction of the Niagara Escarpment Plan, which was a regulation that set aside 450,000 acres and protected it. It was in December the 3rd of 2003, that Dalton McGuinty introduced the Greenbelt Plan that set aside over 1 million acres and protected it. So I could go on and on and on with Temagami and a number of other examples where government has acted to stop or protect, to stop development, inappropriate development, or to protect the environment. All I'm trying to say is that this would not be something extraordinary if the JDCL application got denied. The Ford government, since taking office, has issued over 30 minister zoning orders, which in a snap of the fingers, cutting out the public, has given developers the right to develop over the objections of local citizens. And so this is happening all the time, that people's interests are being compromised by government decision-making. And some of them people like, and some of them they don't like. That's politics. But if this government acts through an MZO or another type of instrument to stop JDCL, and they're preventing them from getting an Aggregate Resources Act, it's happened 33 times in the province of Ontario in the last few months. There's nothing extraordinary about it. It won't be that surprising. So that council should be taking its lead from the Premier and asking itself, why are we continuing with JART when what we've been told and what we're expecting is perfectly consistent with this government's behavior to date? And so, in conclusion, what I would like to say to the residents tonight is that, with respect, If council is going to tell you that JART must continue and it's on advice of planners and lawyers, then as allies, those planners and those lawyers should speak to your lawyer and to your planners, and that there should be a sharing of information. I'm counsel to Core and Pearl. We are talking to our allies over in Burlington. We are not talking to counsel, legal counsel and planners over in Milton. This has been a very mysterious process where there's been no sharing of information. I'm going to have to say this, and it hurts. Milton has not been a good ally to your legal and planning team. This is not the way it's done in other municipalities like Ramara, like Burlington, like in Muskoka, and other places where we are working with town councils. So I don't put that on your councillors. I don't put that on your mayor. But this process, if your town council is going to say that they're allies with Action Milton, then their legal team and their planning team need to start to act like it. And I'm sorry that's a bitter pill to swallow, but I'm paid to tell the truth, and that's the truth. So my concluding remark would be this. I want to thank the mayor for recommending me. I would come and work for you anytime, Mayor. And also, if I worked in Ward 1, I would definitely be voting for Councillor Tesser-Dirksen. Those are my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Paul Gilmore has asked a question. You've said a lot of things, David, and I'm going to pause for a moment to see if the mayor or councillors want to respond to anything you said, and the mayor has raised his hand.
Yeah, Mike, thank you very much. And again, David, thanks for an excellent presentation. And again, Mike, I mentioned earlier on there, putting pen to paper and or electronically, I don't care. On some of the requests that I heard from David there, so make sure that you can address them to me, mayor and members of council. Those, not only those comments, but also, before I forget, I want to make sure that I get a tape of the proceedings there. If you can make sure that that happens, because I don't want to miss anything that was important on this meeting tonight. So, and you know, just on the point there, David, there, as far as I'm concerned, the monies that have been spent, that's part of the public record. I have no issues whatsoever. The public, and you included, should be aware of how much is spent, not only locally, but as Councillor Best had mentioned before on the process. I know there's the NEC, and by the way, I'm a commissioner there as well. I'm also a member of Conservation Halton, and every one of those, the region as well. You know, I believe they have an obligation to share with the public how much has been spent on this process. I don't have any issues with that at all. So if that could be highlighted in your request, Mike. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors Best or Tesser-Dirksen, do you wish to make a comment at this time?
No, the mayor's already answered, and I look forward to the question.
Thank you. Christina?
Yeah, I just want to say again, I thank everyone for their passion and engagement, and remember, we're all on the same team here. Okay, I know there may be disagreements in how the process should be played out or the strategies, but we all have a common goal here, and we're willing to listen, we're willing to take suggestions, and we're willing to speak to whoever wants to speak to us. So let's not make enemies where there's no enemies. Okay, we are not enemies, we're friends.
Thank you, David.
Well, one thing to the mayor, which I probably should have said in my presentation, which is it's critically important, and it's done elsewhere, that through the JART process, citizens groups who have experts are granted a seat at the table through JART. Nobody's sitting at a table anymore. It's all done through emails and Zoom. There is absolutely no harm to having Action Milton included in the dialogue between JART experts and the JDCL experts. The answer so far to our request, which has been made several times, has been no. And that answer has been provided by a bureaucrat who's the chair of JART. He does not sit in judgment of JART. He is not the authority for JART. He doesn't set the terms of reference. It's council that does that. So my question to the mayor is, which I will put in writing, I take your point, Mayor, and that's very helpful to hear that. And we will do that. But I think another primary ask coming from the group is, if JART is not going to be suspended, then Action Milton wants a seat at the virtual table, and it is not an acceptable answer to say that a bureaucrat at the region of Halton is refusing. That is not acceptable to Action Milton. That's a political decision that must be made by you and council.
Just Mike on that, David, you know, you're not going to get an argument from me on your request there. And like I say, everything that I do, we do, and what any public body does has to be, unless it's personnel, legal, or property, is all open to the public. So I personally don't have any issues with anybody being at the table. Thank you.
Okay, it's just a little past 8:30, which is about the time we said this meeting would end, and we'd like to be a good steward of everybody's time. And Zoom itself can be a demanding medium in which to have a meeting. So we are going to wrap up in the next couple of minutes, next few minutes, and I'm going to summarize in terms of Action Milton had a plan moving forward, and I think we are looking for support from the community for that. I'm going to describe a couple of things and ask everybody who's listening to practice finding your reactions button on the toolbar so that you can send a signal about whether you agree or not, or you can put a message into the chat box. So Action Milton came into this meeting proposing to write a letter to Gary Carr, chairperson of Halton Region, and to the town council, asking for to suspend the JART. I think that conversation has evolved tonight with the mayor asking us to put in writing a request to pause JART, and plus some additional items which I won't enumerate again here. So in a moment, I'm going to ask for support from the community for Action Milton to write this letter to Halton and town councils. Maybe I'm going to pause right now and ask that question. So those of you who are in the audience, hands up through the reaction button, or enter a yes, a no, a maybe, a comment in the chat in terms of supporting Action Milton writing a letter to region and town council to support the items we've enumerated tonight. So I hope you're looking for the chat box and looking for the reaction box. And then the second item is, and it's in response to a question that Ruth Hall has put in the chat box, that JDCL has recently responded to our last letters of objection. Our issues remain unresolved, although JDCL states they are resolved, or that they don't have to address them. Do we need to respond to these? Do you recommend that we as individuals take any next steps related to this? So the Action Board has created a letter, which we are going to send out to everyone tomorrow. And I hope, right, Katie, I'm answering Ruth's question right now. And that we are going to send a letter to everybody, which you can send on to JDCL and to CC to Premier Ford and MPP Parham Gill. So that will be coming to you tomorrow as a follow-up to this. And we're looking for support from you in the audience for the letter from Action to the region and to the council, town council. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, again. On that, those letters, when you made reference to the town and the region, could I suggest you also CC NEC and as well Conservation Halton, especially on the JART issues?
That's a good suggestion. Thank you. We'll do that. Okay, so I'm seeing that support in the chat box and other places. The other thing that strikes me is I'm just going to, George, I'm giving you the 1 minute warning before we come back to you for closing comments. There's been a lot of engagement tonight, a lot of good conversation back and forth, and I think that there are other things we may consider actions to take as a community. And so I'm going to recommend to the Action Board that we schedule a community meeting in the next couple of weeks just for community members to talk about how we follow up on the items that have been discussed tonight. So we'll come back to you with future suggestions and organizing of that meeting. George, are you with us?
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. So it's bring us home, George.
Okay. So, you know, I'm going to do a little personal thing here. For those of people who know me really well and have worked with me, the board knows me, and sometimes I'm sure they don't want to know me. I can be a pretty tough guy. I'm a very tough business person, and I've run big companies. And one thing I've learned in business is that when you run a company that can do harm to the public or create a great deal of disruption or destruction, usually those companies fail. The public shuns them and no longer buys from them. We're in a situation that we don't have any control over this application other than the process that we're given. And we all agree or agree to disagree about the process. And, you know, one of the things that I've learned is that in business, one of the things you do, like particularly when I spent years driving strategy in companies as a CEO, always ask the question, what if? You know, what if things don't go according to the plan? What if things do go according to the plan? When will they happen? Who has the R for responsibility to that? Who will be accountable if it doesn't happen? How will we be compensated if it doesn't happen? You know, there's the what if question highlights risks and opportunities. But in this case, you know, and I want to clarify something. I heard Robert, and I know Robert, and I know Mayor Krantz, and I know Colin, I know Christina. I know their conviction as an opposition to this. But they also understand the position that we're in. That a community, you know, is being, in some ways, being held hostage to a process that you ask the question, what if, and the what if keeps coming back. Gosh, what if we get to an LPAT? What if we have to face an LPAT? What do we do then? You know, I saw some 50 people on board tonight. Well, what if there's another 50 people who have said, hey, you know what? The province is going to take care of this. It's over. We don't have to worry about it. Well, that's great. But it doesn't bring resolution. We're going to go into Christmas. We're going to go into New Year's. And Robert, I'd love to send you a note on what I think how the industry, the aggregate industry should change. But we're going to go into Sims holiday seasons. We're stuck in our homes, not being able to go out. And we're going to be wearing masks when we do. And I thought to myself, you know, if this application were to be approved, do I have to wear a mask because of particulate matter 2.5 and COVID? You know, we don't know when that's going to end either. You know, I just think that there's an issue of responsibility here. And I see that everyone, you know, councillors, the mayor, everyone has a sense of responsibility. And as the mayor reminds me, common sense. But we're dealing with a situation that doesn't have a lot of common sense. It's a process that none of us have control over, and we don't know how it's going to turn out. But we need resolutions. So I make no apology for challenging our leaders and the process, because I was challenged as a leader running companies. And I think that for us right now, it's, you know, we're in 100 days tomorrow. If we go another 100 days, we're going to be scratching our heads wondering, are we going to get another letter from the applicant telling us, hey, you know, our resolutions have been resolved by the JARP and that we're ready to go. And then they send that letter to the MNRF saying, hey, everything's resolved, we're ready to go, you know, just license us. We don't need an LPAT. Because I can't go, imagine that they were going to go to the MNRF and ask for an LPAT. They're going to go in asking for an approval. So somewhere along this line, the process needs to stop. If it's genuinely going to happen, it needs to stop soon. Because I'm sure the applicant is spending a lot of money to pursue this. And if we have to go back to our residents to raise more money to fight this, then we will. But why should we? Because right now I hear that Robert telling us on behalf of the Premier and the MPP that, the issue's still on the table, where they've not pulled back. It's good news. It's refreshing news. It's not bad news. But we need it to end. As long as this is an open book and we're continuing in the process of the JART and the applicant can go through their process. And by the way, it does bug me the fact that all applicants in the aggregate got an extension, but the residents group doesn't have one. That bothers me. And I think that, and I'm not asking for one, by the way, Robert, I'm just saying to stop it. But what I'm getting to here is, that what if keeps me up at night, because I don't know when it's going to stop. And to face the JART and spend, I don't know how much it costs to do that. I know that the cost of doing an LPAT for residents can range 800,000 to over $1 million. In fact, the one figure that we were given was around 1.2. That's insanity. A residents group should not have to raise that kind of money. And, forgive me for saying this, but very few residents groups actually win at an LPAT. And, I'm not saying that we would lose, because one thing that we have on our side is certainly the town and the region and the province. Everybody is opposed to it. Somehow that plays in your favor. And if, and this is for the mayor and the councillors, if we continue on this chart, and if we are if we end up at an LPAT, I would say that the best thing that could happen to this community is for the region and the town to take over this fight. We'll sit at the table, we'll make our position, but I think that cost should go to the town and the region, not to the resident. That way you remove a lot of what ifs. And not that I'm proposing that we move forward with a fight at an LPAT. I'm just saying that responsibility needs to lie somewhere else, not with residents. We shouldn't have to take our after-tax dollars and spend it on something that doesn't need to be, that has it's a process in favor of supporting a proponent. And I know that the provincial government knows that, the regional government knows that, and our town councillors know that, and the mayor knows that. And so I'm asking as a community leader, please stop this soon. The tension and the stress, and Christina, I heard you that, we're all on the same page, but, I agree with you. We're all on the same page. But the frustration, if we end up facing an LPAT, will not be putting us all on the same page. And I believe that responsibility, that ownership lies with the Premier to come through on his commitment. And that's Mike showing up to tell me enough.
Giving you the hook, George.
I know. All right, that's it. I mean, we're always available for questions. So thank you. Thank you for making yourself available.
Good night, everybody. We're formally adjourned.